Your story, our station.
If you've ever felt trapped in that endless top 40 loop, you know the feeling. Same songs, same sounds, same safe choices. Like the world hit repeat and lost the button to try something new. Today, I want to introduce you to a crew that's built to do the exact opposite. Change the station entirely. Bullet End Flight is based right in the heart of the 505, Albuquerque, where the green chili runs hot and the creative energy somehow runs even hotter. And when I say Bullet End Flight, I'm not talking about one single project or one single vibe. Think of it more like a parent company to a whole family of artistic misfits. People who don't fit neatly into the usual boxes, and honestly, don't want to. At the center of everything is a mission that's pretty simple to say, but not always easy to pull off. Elevate the voices that usually get talked over. The artists who get labeled too niche, or too different, or that weird one, too Albuquerque. Whatever that's supposed to mean. If you've ever heard something like that about your work, this is your invitation to pull up a chair. Because that's not a deal breaker here. That's the whole point. Bullet End Flight is built around inclusivity, creative community building, and giving underrepresented artists the megaphone they deserve. Not as a trend, not as a marketing angle, but as the core identity. It's a response to a creative world that can feel gated, filtered, and overly polished, where the most interesting voices get told to tone it down so they can be easier to sell. And here's where it gets fun. Bullet End Flight doesn't believe in staying in one lane. Because why would you? Why drive a sedan when you could take a spaceship? The whole approach is more like, what does human expression look like across every format? And then going after all of it. Let's start with music, because that's a major part of the DNA. The mindset here isn't pick a genre and stay in it. It's more like, what's the vibe and does it hit? That can mean the spiritual charge of gospel, the late-night pulse of house music, the smooth storytelling and emotion of R&B, or even that classic country charm where life falls apart but somehow the drink is still cold. It's not about fitting into a category. It's about making something that feels alive. But it doesn't stop at music. There's a strong dedication to the spoken word too. Podcasts that get into the real stuff, not just surface-level chatter, and poetry that doesn't play nice. The kind that lands heavy, the kind that says what people avoid saying, the kind that reminds you words can still be dangerous in the best way. Then there's film and TV writing. Getting into scripts that actually have a heartbeat. Not another recycled reboot of a reboot. Not something designed by committee to offend the fewest people possible. The focus is on stories with soul. Stories with perspective. Stories that sound like they came from real lives, in real places, with real edges. And of course, the stage. Because there is nothing like live performance. It's unpredictable, it's electric, and yeah, anything can happen. And usually does. The stage is where art stops being an idea and becomes a moment, right in front of people who can feel it in real time. So why would an artist want to plug into something like this? Because being a starving artist has been romanticized for way too long, and it doesn't need to be the default. And being a lonely artist, trying to build everything by yourself, with no village, no network, no support, That's even worse. Bullet End Flight is about building that village on purpose. The goal is to take the talent that's been brewing in the Southwest, often overlooked, often underestimated, and project it outward. Not in a please notice us kind of way, but in a we're already here, and we're bringing the whole sound with us kind of way. Bullet End Flight positions itself as a launch pad, a safety net, and the hype you didn't realize you were missing. And let's be honest, a lot of people are tired of gatekeepers. Tired of needing permission. Tired of feeling like they have to sand down everything interesting about their work to be taken seriously. If that's you, this is a space that's built for finding your tribe. People who want loud, weird, real art, and who aren't afraid to make it together. If you want to get in the mix, Deombase is https://just-dominic. And if you want the visuals, you can find the YouTube channel at Just Dominic Music. Bullet End Flight Music, LLC is the company behind it all. And the invitation is open. Check out what's being built, listen to what's coming out, and if you're ready to change the station, this is a good place to start.
Welcome back. We continue our discussion on why men rape.
Professor.
Rapists are closely related to chimpanzees, except the chimpanzee has more intelligence.
Chimps are smarter than rapists?
Oh yes, the average chimp is much more advanced than any rapist.
How can you tell?
Well, ask any rapist why he rapes and you'll get a completely idiotic answer.
You can never justify rape.
Most people who consider suicide don't really want to die. They feel helpless, they feel hopeless, they feel worthless. Oftentimes they have problems they don't think they can solve, they don't think anyone else understands, and they see suicide as the only way out.
If you suspect that someone may be suffering in silence, that they may be dealing with suicidal thoughts, it's important to say something, because by starting that conversation, that allows that person to really open up and start to share what they've been carrying with them.
While no one can predict suicide, there are risk factors that have been shown to increase the risk of someone being a victim of suicide. Some important static risk factors include, most importantly, prior suicide attempts. There are about 25 suicide attempts for each completed suicide nationwide. Second, we know that men are generally at higher risk for suicide than women. Someone who is going through depression, someone who's had a recent loss, and someone who's experiencing anxiety, who's suffering with substance use disorder is at higher risk for suicide.
Being a survivor of somebody that died by suicide can be one of the most difficult experiences somebody will have to go through in their entire life. And for that family member to realize that, one, it really is not your fault. Unfortunately, for things like this, there's nothing that family member could have done. And to also realize that whatever emotions they are feeling, it's okay. There's going to be anger, there's going to be grief, there's going to be relief, and that any one of those emotions is okay.
What we're hoping to do is give them some hope, to let them know that people care. We want to start the conversation, we want to help to bust the stigma so that people begin talking about suicide, because that's the only way that we're going to put an end to it.
Work a miracle in your finances. The Lord is getting ready to make a miracle. Make some noise if you're ready for an increase. An increase in your bank account. An increase in your relationships. Can I get an amen?
Christians. I'm not saying I'm not one. I'm saying I mess up. That make me not ever want to be a Christian. Lord, forgive them. They hide behind religion. I want to make an announcement. I'm a believer in Jesus. I believe that he died for my sins. I know that he's a redeemer. My problem is people I should have got saved from, but I heard they were saved. But since the beginning, the Christians been using his name for personal gain. So I know that this sound like it's unrelated, but how did we build up Americans? A group of European settlers came across the water. They was terrorists. They burned down the innocent villages, women and children, and made up a narrative. They said that God told them they were supposed to do it. Now let's make the comparison. Nowadays, nobody murder you under religion no more, and it's scarier. They murder your vision of God, and you start thinking maybe the Lord is a character. Cause it seemed like the evilest people I met was the strongest promoters of Jesus. Cause he died to forgive us of all of our sins, so they used that to cope with the demons. I know an atheist that molested his daughters, but he kept a perfect image. Did it for so many years, and then when he got caught, all of a sudden he turned to Christian. It's never too late, but I just find it funny it wasn't one day that he served in prison. About 30 years doing the same shit. Then he found God in 30 minutes. I know this one pastor molested his daughter. The staff of the church keep on saying forgive him. I know this girl that got raped and her mama wish happy birthdays to the person that did it. I know that Jesus forgave us, but some things I struggle to learn how to work on forgiving. I know a mama who cut off her son for religion. What kind of Jehovah she witnessed? This one girl I changed my ways with, convinced herself that I cheated. She said she had confirmation from the spirit, stopped picking up calls for no reason. She got romantic with one of my closest homies less than 30 days while I was grieving. He ain't know that I knew he called me, I confronted her, man, he gon' blame it on Jesus. He said God told me this was my wife. Well, she told me he said I'm her husband. So which one was God? Which one of y'all lied? Be honest, I find it disgusting. And I know a pastor that took a donation and went bought his wife a new Lexus. You know you was supposed to take that and upgrade the facility. Why you finessing? The worst ever Christians, the ones that believe that they talking to God when it's really ambition. Convincing themselves that it's genuine, trying to block out the hidden agendas. And they play on the hearts of the Christian beginners with hallelujahs, and they memorize scriptures. Made me gullible cause it was convincing. God, I need you to come fix me. I don't want to give up believing cause I still remember all of the times that you helped me and saved me when I ain't deserve it cause I'm still a sinner. It's just that all of the Christians you sent me that I got to witness, they always pretenders. All of them wicked, and for the life of me I just don't see why I gotta forgive them. Need you to heal me, God, I know you real. That's why I'm on my knees begging. Isaiah 29, verse 13, I just wish I would've read it. He said they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Father, please protect me from Christians. Not saying I'm not one, I'm saying I mess up. That make me not ever wanna be. The power of my might, you don't. I follow God, but I will never ever follow Christians.
I'm in the midst. I put the three of you together because he said that a three, can't even get it out, Father.
Lord, forgive them.
Forgive me right now, Father.
They hide behind religion.
Thank you, Jesus.
I can't make that up, bro.
You can't make it up because I have been through the same thing.
Hello everyone, this is Walt B. right here on Bullet in Flight Radio. Your story, our station, the best progressive Christian network in the world.
Welcome back to Bulletin Flight Radio. Today we're digging into a question that's emotional, political, and deeply personal for a lot of people. What's the Catholic Church's history around human rights, drag queens, and transgender fear, and in what ways has that shaped American progress and mental wellness?
And just so we're clear about the scope up front, we're talking about more than theology. We're talking about policy, culture, public messaging, shame, family relationships, and the real-world consequences that flow from what powerful institutions bless, condemn, or quietly ignore.
Let's start with a data point that says a lot about where things stand in the United States right now. A Pew Research Center survey found that a majority of U.S. adults and families, 53%, have no connection to the Catholic faith. That same research, based on a sample of self-identified American Catholics, paints a complicated, painful picture of what Catholic identity even means in modern America and around the world.
So why are so many disconnected? People will have different reasons, but a few themes keep coming up again and again. Long-standing abuse, long-standing silence, and long-standing discrimination. And for LGBTQ people and their families, which is nearly every family, that last word, discrimination, can be the difference between feeling welcome in a community and feeling spiritually and socially exiled from it. Being a Christian is now a dirty word.
Now, The Church's relationship with homosexuality has always been described as its biggest, dirtiest obsession. Deeply complicated, two-faced, and contentious. And that's not just because people disagree about morality. It's also because the Church has tried to hold two messages at the same time, and those messages don't always land the way leaders intend. On the doctrinal side, traditional Catholic teaching draws a line between attraction and behavior. In that framework, experiencing same-sex attraction is not described as inherently sinful in itself, but sexual relationships between two people of the same sex are treated as a grave violation of chastity. And, institutionally, the Church does not recognize divorcee, and lean left in politics on civil rights, women's rights, birth control, and reproductive issues. At the same time, the Catechism also says that all people, including gay people, must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity, and that unjust discrimination should be avoided.
If you're listening and thinking, okay, but how does that play out in real life, you're asking the right question. Because there's the official wording, and then there's how it feels when it's lived. For many LGBTQ Catholics, the experience has been, you are told you should be treated with dignity, but the deepest parts of your love life, your family dreams, your public identity, are treated as unacceptable or disordered. That gap between respect and refusal is where a lot of harm takes root, especially psychologically. And when we talk about drag queens and transgender people, we're not just talking about who someone loves. We're talking about gender expression, gender identity, and the intense moral panic that gets whipped up around both. To understand why this matters right now, we have to talk about what the Vatican under Pope Francis has said recently, because it has signaled movement, but also set limits that many people see as telling.
In December 2023, the Vatican released a document that formally permitted blessings for same-sex civil unions. Let's underline what that is and what it isn't. It's not sacramental marriage. It's not a wedding. It's not a change to the Church's definition of marriage. But it is a change in tone and in pastoral permission, because it opens a door that had been closed much more tightly for a long time. And Pope Francis had already been speaking favorably about civil unions since 2020, so this was part of a broader direction, though the official document made it more concrete.
Predictably, reactions were split. Some Catholics and LGBTQ people heard it as a long overdue gesture of human recognition, an acknowledgement that these relationships exist and that people within them still seek God. Others saw it as confusing, insufficient, or even as a threat to traditional teaching. So you get praise and criticism at the same time, often from both inside and outside the Church.
But there were conditions. The Vatican said these blessings can't be given in a way that looks like a wedding, and they can't be attached to a Catholic ritual service in a way that blurs the line with marriage. And that brings us to the key question: what message do those conditions send?
Here's one way to interpret it. The Church is trying to offer something that feels pastoral, some kind of blessing, while also protecting its public boundary. Marriage remains between a man and a woman in its sacramental framework. The problem is that people don't only hear policy, they hear hierarchy. They hear, you can receive something, but only if it's clearly not too much, and only if we can make sure everyone knows it's not the real thing. For some LGBTQ Catholics, that can feel like being tolerated at arm's length. For others, even that small opening is meaningful. But whether it's a step forward or a carefully measured concession depends a lot on context. Where you live, what your parish is like, and what your local leadership believes. And that idea, context, matters even more when we look beyond the United States, because the Catholic Church isn't just a collection of private spiritual communities. It's a global institution with political and cultural alliances that differ dramatically from place to place. One scholar, Professor Alexandria Wilson MacDonald, has researched what's called the anti-gender movement, especially in Eastern Europe. This isn't just a vague cultural trend. It's an organized political and social movement that targets LGBTQ people and human rights advocates, often in the name of defending traditional family values. And according to this research, the Catholic Church has been one of the institutions that, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, has supported the movement alongside other conservative actors.
In Poland and Slovakia, for example, where religious identity and national politics can be closely intertwined, church-related organizations and national-level church leaders have at times aligned themselves with far-right parties and organizations. That alignment isn't only symbolic, it's embedded in governance. In Poland, there's the Concordat ratified in 1998, which strengthened the Vatican's influence and weakened the separation between church and state. In Slovakia, a similar basic agreement was signed in 2000 that granted the church special privileges. So the church isn't just speaking into society, it's woven into how policy gets shaped. And when you combine strong church-state ties with a political right that's built power through anti-LGBT messaging, the results can be severe. One of the starkest examples in recent years has been the rise of so-called LGBT-free zones in parts of Poland, an outcome that reflects not only personal prejudice but institutional momentum.
So when the Pope says, blessings can be allowed, will local leadership in those contexts suddenly shift? The evidence suggests, not necessarily. In fact, after the Vatican's approval of blessings for same-sex couples, the Polish Episcopal Conference publicly indicated it does not plan to implement blessings for same-sex couples. That tells you something important about the Catholic Church today. It is one church, but it does not operate with one uniform culture on the ground. At the very same time, Pope Francis's statements can still matter. Even if implementation is uneven, the highest-profile voice in Catholicism offering a less hostile posture can give leverage to human rights advocates, LGBTQ Catholics, and allies who are trying to move public rhetoric away from demonization and toward basic dignity.
Now let's shift to transgender inclusion, because this is where doctrine, identity, and the politics of fear collide in a very intense way. In another recent Vatican document, the Church stated that transgender people may be baptized, like any other member of the faithful, and can potentially serve as godparents and witnesses at baptisms and weddings. That's significant, especially when you compare it to a 2015 position from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which had stated transgender people could not serve as godparents. So yes, there is movement here, movement that changes real access to sacraments and community roles. But it comes with a major caveat: the Church still holds strict views on sex and gender. The underlying doctrine does not accept gender as a social construct. In that framework, what matters is biological sex, and gender is treated as something tied to the body in an essential way. You are born male or female, and your social role and identity are expected to follow that assignment. And this opposition to the concept of gender as socially constructed isn't new. It goes back at least to the 1990s, when there were debates inside religious conservative circles about international women's rights discussions, especially around the 1995 World Conference on Women and broader United Nations recognition of sexual and reproductive rights. For many religious conservatives, the language of gender became linked to fears about abortion rights and the erosion of a traditional family model. So over time, the term gender itself became loaded, treated not as a neutral description, but as a threat. That history helps explain why today's partial inclusion of transgender people in certain sacramental contexts can still coexist with an institution that does not fully recognize transgender or non-binary experiences as valid in the way those individuals understand themselves.
In other words, the door may open in specific ways, baptism, godparent roles, but the foundation of doctrine remains in place. That can feel like progress and rejection happening at the same time. Now, we also have to address drag queens specifically, because drag gets pulled into this conversation as a cultural symbol. Drag is performance, but it's also a lightning rod in modern politics, where it's often treated as inherently immoral or dangerous, especially in moral panic narratives about children.
Historically, many Christian spaces, including Catholic communities, have been uncomfortable with anyone that is a stranger of considered different, like gender nonconformity in public. Unless it's in a blockbuster movie, stage play, and television series they adore, starring actors they don't know but claim to love. People whose expression broke gender norms were frequently pushed out, shamed, or forced to choose between authenticity and belonging, in a two-faced kind of way. Freedom is not freedom in many organizations, unless many Christian gatekeepers can market and manage it.
At the same time, not all faith communities have stayed in that posture. Across some other Christian traditions, Methodist, Lutheran, Unitarian Universalist, and other more progressive congregations, you can find places where drag has been welcomed into worship or community events as a form of affirmation and visibility. That's not the Catholic Church broadly, but it does show something important. Religion isn't automatically incompatible with queer and gender-diverse life. The friction comes from specific doctrines, traditions, and power structures, and whether those structures see difference as threat or as humanity. Within Catholicism itself, LGBTQ Catholics have organized and advocated for decades. Groups like Dignity USA and New Ways Ministry form to support LGBTQ Catholics and seek inclusion. But those efforts have often been met with institutional pushback, restrictions on meeting spaces, doctrinal warnings, and ongoing suspicion by church authorities in some eras and regions.
So when people ask, has the church harmed mental wellness? It's not just theoretical. When you're told you are loved by God but your identity makes you a problem, when you are allowed in the pew but discouraged from full participation, when your relationships are treated as lesser, when your community treats you as scandal, those things can create chronic stress, internalized shame, family conflict, and spiritual trauma. And we can't talk about harm and credibility without confronting the sexual abuse crisis, because it changed everything about how people evaluate the church as a moral authority.
In the United States, the abuse crisis exposed systemic failure. Abuse that occurred over decades, patterns of secrecy, reassignment of clergy, and victims being ignored, pressured into silence, or disbelieved. The Boston area became one of the most widely known flashpoints, with investigations revealing vast numbers of abused children and cover-ups that went far beyond individual wrongdoing. It was structural. It involved leadership decisions. The result has been a deep credibility wound. When an institution presents itself as guardian of morality, but is revealed to have protected abusers while preaching about purity and family values, people don't just feel betrayed. They reassess everything the institution says about sexuality, about gender, about what counts as sin, and who is allowed to belong. And this is part of why you see declining attendance and growing division among Catholics themselves. Some stay and want reform. Some stay and want tradition enforced harder. Some leave entirely. Some never had a connection and now want nothing to do with it. Public accountability has grown over time, including online databases and diocesan lists of clergy who have been publicly accused. Estimates cited in public reporting suggest that thousands of priests and clergy members in the U.S., in the range of roughly 4,800 to 6,700, have been publicly accused over the decades, with large numbers in states like New York, California, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Illinois. Resources like bishopaccountability.org, ProPublica's centralized database, and various diocesan lists have made it harder to bury cases in silence.
Of course, it's also important to say something careful here. Being publicly accused is not the same as legal guilt in every case, and allegations can be at different stages, unproven, under investigation, settled, prosecuted, or tragically, never fully adjudicated. But even acknowledging that complexity, the scale of allegations has reshaped public trust. And for survivors and their families, the focus isn't just on counting names. It's on whether the institution chose protection of the vulnerable or protection of itself.
That crisis intersects with LGBTQ issues in a painful way, because it often looks like this from the outside. Harshness toward consensual adult relationships, and softness, or at least a long history of institutional evasion, toward exploitation and abuse. Even when those are separate issues morally and legally, they become linked in the public mind through the lens of institutional hypocrisy. So when we ask how all this has affected American progress, we're really asking how institutional power has been used. The church has undeniably played major roles in education, charity, immigrant communities, and moral discourse. But the church's resistance to LGBTQ equality, and its entanglement with political movements that frame queer people as threats, has slowed civil rights progress in many places and fueled stigma that harms mental health. And because America is a pluralistic country, this isn't just about what the church does inside its walls. It's about how religious messaging becomes political advocacy, how it shapes laws about marriage, adoption, healthcare, school policy, and freedom of expression. When a powerful institution treats certain identities as unacceptable, that can echo outward into families, schools, and legislatures.
Now let's zoom out to the global institution for a moment, because change and decline happen differently depending on where you look. Globally, the Catholic Church remains enormous, but its demographics are shifting. Recent yearbook-style reporting indicates there are just over 400,000 priests worldwide, around 406,996, with a slight decline year over year. Growth is stronger in parts of Africa and Asia, while Europe and the Americas have been trending downward in priest numbers. Aging clergy and fewer vocations in some regions are a major factor there. Why mention that in an episode about LGBTQ issues and mental wellness? Because institutional capacity affects what reform looks like. A church that's shrinking in some regions may respond by tightening identity boundaries. Or it may respond by trying new forms of pastoral outreach. And in a global institution, you can see both at once. New growth in one region aligned with conservative social norms, and pressure for inclusion in another region shaped by civil rights movements. So where does that leave us today?
On one hand, the Vatican has signaled some openings. Blessings for same-sex civil unions under strict conditions, and increased sacramental inclusion for transgender people in specific roles. Compared to previous decades, those are real shifts in official posture. On the other hand, the core doctrinal framework on sex, gender, and marriage has not been rewritten. And the on-the-ground reality is uneven. Some bishops' conferences and local leadership have already signaled they won't follow the Vatican's lead on blessings. Political alliances, like those tied to anti-gender movements, are still active. And the Church's credibility remains deeply damaged by the ongoing legacy of the abuse crisis and cover-ups.
If you're an LGBTQ person with Catholic roots, you may be listening with a mix of anger, hope, grief, and exhaustion. If you're Catholic and trying to reconcile faith with compassion, you might be asking what it means to be loyal to the Church without being loyal to harm. And if you're outside the Church, you may be wondering why an institution's internal rules matter so much to public life.
Here's the reality. They matter because the Church is not only a, quote, spiritual community. It's a cultural force, a gossip hub, and, in many places, the place where innocence was stolen and a political act followed. Its words ripple outward like whip, and so do its silences.
So maybe the best way to close today is with a grounded takeaway. The history here is not a simple story of pure intolerance or pure progress. It's a pattern of doctrinal caution, cultural resistance, and evolving pastoral practice, sometimes producing exclusion, sometimes producing partial inclusion, often producing contradiction. And those contradictions have consequences for people's mental health, family stability, and sense of belonging. All this are making the cries to end religion and its evil ways in the world.
Time for a reckoning.
If change is going to mean anything, it can't just be about documents in Rome. The upper leadership need to face the truth and atone for their many sins against the world. It has to show up locally, in whether a teenager feels safe in a Catholic school, whether a trans person is treated as fully human in a parish office, whether a gay couple is treated with dignity instead of being treated like a problem to manage, and whether survivors of abuse are met with truth instead of bureaucracy.
That's the work. That's the long road towards accountability. And that's the difference between an institution that slows human progress and one that participates in it. In closing, the Catholic Church has a shameful history, and we believe it's time to drop the Religion Act and start deconstructing and atoning for centuries for hurt, harm, rape, cover-ups, greed, and every other corruption that still lies under cover. We believe it is time to forsake man's religions and seek relationship with the divine. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for listening to Bullet in Flight Radio. Your story, our station. If this conversation brought up something personal for you, take care of yourself, and consider reaching out to someone you trust. We'll be back soon with another episode.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Daryl, the melanated one, from the Daryl Walter Show on Bullet in Flight Radio. Your story, our station, the best progressive Christian network in the world. I'll see y'all soon, all right?
I can't breathe. I have migraines, numbness, weight loss. I live with it every day. The illness that I'm suffering from is an anxiety disorder, and it deserves to be treated like any other illness. But it's not.
Our differences are what set us apart as humans, but is the cause of hatred amongst us. There are white people, black people, girls, boys, gay people, straight people, fat people, skinny people, rich people, poor people, people with different beliefs. But underneath, we are all the same. No matter who you are, your blood is red just like mine. So why should any of us be treated differently? We are world change.
What's up, everyone? This is DJ B, and you're listening to Bullet in Flight Radio, your story, our station, the best progressive Christian network in the world.
If you've ever felt trapped in that endless top 40 loop, you know the feeling. Same songs, same sounds, same safe choices. Like the world hit repeat and lost the button to try something new. Today, I want to introduce you to a crew that's built to do the exact opposite. Change the station entirely. Bullet in Flight is based right in the heart of the 505, Albuquerque, where the green chili runs hot and the creative energy somehow runs even hotter. And when I say Bullet in Flight, I'm not talking about one single project or one single vibe. Think of it more like a parent company to a whole family of artistic misfits. People who don't fit neatly into the usual boxes, and honestly, don't want to. At the center of everything is a mission that's pretty simple to say, but not always easy to pull off. Elevate the voices that usually get talked over. The artists who get labeled too niche, or too different, or that weird one, too Albuquerque. Whatever that's supposed to mean. If you've ever heard something like that about your work, this is your invitation to pull up a chair. Because that's not a deal breaker here. That's the whole point. Bullet in Flight is built around inclusivity, creative community building, and giving underrepresented artists the megaphone they deserve. Not as a trend, not as a marketing angle, but as the core identity. It's a response to a creative world that can feel gated, filtered, and overly polished, where the most interesting voices get told to tone it down so they can be easier to sell. And here's where it gets fun. Bullet in Flight doesn't believe in staying in one lane. Because why would you? Why drive a sedan when you could take a spaceship? The whole approach is more like, what does human expression look like across every format? And then going after all of it. Let's start with music, because that's a major part of the DNA. The mindset here isn't pick a genre and stay in it. It's more like, what's the vibe, and does it hit? That can mean the spiritual charge of gospel, the late-night pulse of house music, the smooth storytelling and emotion of R&B, or even that classic country charm where life falls apart but somehow the drink is still cold. It's not about fitting into a category. It's about making something that feels alive. But it doesn't stop at music. There's a strong dedication to the spoken word too. Podcasts that get into the real stuff, not just surface-level chatter, and poetry that doesn't play nice. The kind that lands heavy, the kind that says what people avoid saying, the kind that reminds you words can still be dangerous in the best way. Then there's film and TV writing. Getting into scripts that actually have a heartbeat. Not another recycled reboot of a reboot. Not something designed by committee to offend the fewest people possible. The focus is on stories with soul. Stories with perspective. Stories that sound like they came from real lives, in real places, with real edges. And of course, the stage. Because there is nothing like live performance. It's unpredictable, it's electric, and yeah, anything can happen. And usually does. The stage is where art stops being an idea and becomes a moment, right in front of people who can feel it in real time. So why would an artist want to plug into something like this? Because being a starving artist has been romanticized for way too long, and it doesn't need to be the default. And being a lonely artist, Trying to build everything by yourself, with no village, no network, no support, that's even worse. Bullet and Flight is about building that village on purpose. The goal is to take the talent that's been brewing in the Southwest, often overlooked, often underestimated, and project it outward. Not in a please notice us kind of way, but in a we're already here, and we're bringing the whole sound with us kind of way. Bullet and Flight positions itself as a launch pad, a safety net, and the hype you didn't realize you were missing. And let's be honest, a lot of people are tired of gatekeepers, tired of needing permission, tired of feeling like they have to sand down everything interesting about their work to be taken seriously. If that's you, this is a space that's built for finding your tribe. People who want loud, weird, real art, and who aren't afraid to make it together.
If you want to get in the mix, Deombase is https://just-dominic.
And if you want the visuals, you can find the YouTube channel at Just Dominic Music. Bullet and Flight Music, LLC is the company behind it all. And the invitation is open. Check out what's being built, listen to what's coming out, and if you're ready to change the station, this is a good place to start.
Bullet and Flight, fly. Bullet and Flight, fly. Bullet and Flight, bullet and flight, bullet and flight, fly. Bullet and flight.